first question is there year-round access to the property in both rainy season and dry season? And this seems like kind of a strange question because in North America, roads work, whether it's winter, summer, spring, rain, dry, roads work all year round. But in Latin America, a lot of the dirt roads, where a lot of the projects and developments are located along the beach especially, or up in the mountains, those roads look great in the dry season. In fact, when they're graded, you can drive 45 miles an hour on them, so you can really just zoom right along. But in the rainy season, many of these roads turn into mud pits where literally you have to get pulled out by a team of oxen because you're up to your axles in mud. And so one of the tips we have is if you're buying property at the end of a dirt road, buy it in the rainy season. Because when you buy property in the rainy season, you know how bad the road is going to get. And that's really important because you want to know that you can get to your property in the rainy season. The other thing is creeks and rivers, as they call them. A lot of rivers here, I would call them creeks. But anyway, growing up in northwest Pennsylvania. But these rivers/creeks run dry in the dry season, no water. And in the rainy season, there might be 8-10 feet of water in that thing rushing down. So again, these are the kinds of things you find out in rainy season that you would never know in dry season. So year-round access to the property is absolutely paramount for your quality of life satisfaction if you're an owner of a property at the end of a dirt road, which again, many communities and developments in Latin America on the beach or in the mountains especially are at the end of a dirt road because the government doesn't have the money to pave the roads like we do in North America, in the US and Canada. A lot of times public road improvements are actually made by the developer, not by the government. I know in our case we've spent over $1 million fixing a public road so that we have the year-round access that's needed by our residents and neighbors at Grand Pacifica specifically and in the other communities that we're building as well. A lot of times in this part of the world you'll hear people talk about distances in miles or kilometers. But that's irrelevant. A distance is a time. How long does it take you to get from point A to point B? And it goes back to the idea of the dirt roads versus paved roads and what kind of conditions these roads are in. But at the end of the day, you want to know how long it takes to go from point A to point B. And so, yeah, finding out how far it is to the hospital, how long it will take you to get to the hospital, how long it'll take you to get to the grocery store, the bank. I mean, these are the kinds of things, again, that really factor into quality of life. And I know a lot of people who live in rural parts of the United States and Canada. I grew up in northwest Pennsylvania and very rural. And for us to get to the grocery store was 15-20 minutes. No big deal. You jump in your car, you drive 15-20 minutes, you're at the grocery store. That is what's important to feel what's your comfort level for how long it takes to get somewhere. And then make sure you're locating yourself where you feel comfortable. Question number 2 is, what does the infrastructure look like? Infrastructure is so important. In fact, my wife tells me all the time, don't talk about infrastructure. It's not sexy. And she's right. It's not sexy because many times the infrastructure is what's buried under the ground and you never see it again. But it's also the roads and the sidewalks and the street lights and all the things that are important for quality of life. And in fact, infrastructure is ultimately the most important thing for quality of life. One of the least sexy things that I can talk about is storm water drainage. Managing that, engineering that up front. Because here's the reality. In Latin America, in the tropics, we get rains. And when it rains, it can rain 3 or 4 inches in 3 or 4 hours. And when it rains 4 inches of rain in 3 or 4 hours, you got a ton of water going wherever it goes. It's so important for a developer to come in and engineer where that water's going to go. Put in the 24 and 36-inch storm drains under the streets to take that water and move it somewhere where the developer has decided it wants to go. Or the water's going to go where God wants it to go. And that might not be good for the home or the property that you have. If you're in the way of a big rushing wall of water every time it rains, that's not good. So again, infrastructure, so important, so critically important for your long-term satisfaction. Streets, right? Paved streets, dirt streets. What do you want? Make that evaluation. Buy what you see. If you go to a development and they've got dirt streets and you're happy with that, great. If they got above ground electricity and telephone poles and wires running, great. If you prefer underground, you need to see it. Buy what you see. It's so important. Gonna. You'll hear me talk about more and more as we go through these questions, the word gonna. Gonna is the easiest word in the developer lexicon. We're gonna put in underground utilities. We're gonna build a swimming pool. We're gonna build a golf course. Gonna. Gonna doesn't matter. Buy what you see. If the land has underground utilities, it's worth the price with underground utilities. If the land is bare and nothing there, well then it's worth raw land. So again, at the end of the day, buy what you see is so important, because unlike the United States and Canada, where we have bonding requirements, developers have to bond for performance. They actually have to post money or post assets to say, yeah, we promised all these streets and sidewalks and all the clubhouses and all these amenities. We've bonded to perform. Well, in Latin America, there's no performance bond, so a developer can pretty much say whatever they want and deliver whatever they can. And I'm not saying developers come out and try to con people up front, although some do, but most don't. But the reality is that, you know, underfunding, lack of funding, inadequate funding really plagues the development industry in Latin America. So a developer with the best intentions in the world can talk about what they're gonna do, and they really, truly, I believe in their heart of hearts, believe they're going to do it. But the money runs short. They don't sell as many lots as they thought they were going to sell. Whatever. Some event happens to really stop the progress of their community. Well, you've already bought, you own, and now you may or may not have electric or streets or whatever it is. So buy what you see is probably the single most important aspect of the 15 questions. Because if you buy what you see, you'll always be happy with what you own. Is there enough fresh water and water pressure? Wow. This one's so, I don't know, seemingly trivial. But, you know, the reality is I don't know if you all have taken a drip shower. I've taken some drip showers in Central America, you know, different hotels. And they're no fun. I mean, you're up there, you're trying to get the soap off, and, right? Drip showers are no fun. Water pressure. My goodness, you're out snorkeling, you're out playing volleyball, you play golf, you ride horseback all day, you come back to your condo, turn on the water, you know, take a nice hot shower. My goodness, as crazy as this sounds, that's incredible quality of life. That's quality of life. And it's, you know, I think anybody can suffer through a drip shower for a week on vacation or a few days here and there. But if you own a home or a condo and you're going to live in this for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, my goodness, you want water pressure. Water pressure is dependent upon the developer building the systems, the water systems, to produce it for you, the homeowner or the condo owner. So one of the simple tests we have is when you're visiting a home or a condo, go in, turn on all the faucets, flush the toilet, and see if there's water pressure. That's important in the long run. Again, seemingly trivial, but my goodness, I certainly love a shower with a lot of water pressure. Is the house or condominium plumbed with hot water? And coming from North America, I think many of us would scratch our heads and go, of course it is. But see, we don't know what we don't know. And what we don't know is this. We don't know that in many cases, only the master bedroom will actually have hot and cold water running to it. The guest bedrooms, the maids' rooms, even the kitchen has one single water pipe, a cold water pipe running to the faucets. And because of that, we don't check. So we get excited, we fall in love with a beautiful home at the beach or a condo or something like that. And then now we own it, and we come back and we, in our master bedroom, we've got it. And then maybe our in-laws or our kids come by or our grandkids come, and gosh, there's no hot water in the bathroom, Grandpa, or whatever. And my goodness, how do you fix that after the fact? It's hard to fix it after. Can you? Yes, you can put in the Insta water heaters. You have to bust out concrete because most things in this part of the world are built out of concrete. It's expensive. It's inconvenient. It's just better to make sure that your home or condominium actually has two pipes running to every bathroom so that you have hot and cold running water. In fact, we have a great picture. The picture is where they've run a Y adapter out of the wall up to the hot and cold water taps. And so, you know, and again, if you were just reading this without seeing the picture, You might think to yourself, okay, yeah, I walk into the bathroom, I turn on one side, and there's water, I turn it off, I turn on the other side, put my hand under it on the hot side, and you'd say to yourself, yeah, that water heater's way over there by the garage. Whatever, I'm not going to stand here for 2-3 minutes and let this water get hot. Well, the reality is you could stand there for 2 or 3 minutes, 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 years. As you see in the picture, that water's never getting hot. So again, the only way we know that there's hot and cold running water in a bathroom is to actually get down on our hands and knees and look under the sink and see if you've got 2 pipes coming out of the wall. We as North Americans would not think to do that 9 times out of 10. Again, we don't know what we don't know. So here are the questions. So let's go on to the next question. One question I get asked a lot is, how far is it to major medical care, both in the rainy season and the dry season, and in time, as we talked about in question number 1. I've been speaking at conferences for 20 years, and I have literally met and talked with thousands and thousands of people like yourself who are thinking about owning property in this part of the world. Medical care and the quality of medical care and the time to medical care is the single most asked question it's on everybody's mind, and it's probably the most important question as well, because in the end, medical care is what we worry about more than anything else. Yeah, we care about the nice weather. Yeah, we care about the beach if we're beach people. We care about golf if we're golfers. We care about, the other amenities, the clubhouses and restaurants and the community, which is also very important. But what tends to be first and foremost on our minds when we're considering a move overseas is medical care. How good is it, and how long does it take to get there? Again, it's not the number of miles, it's the time to get there in the dry season, which will be much quicker because the roads are better, and in the rainy season, when the roads may not be as good. The first thing we have to look at is, are there building requirements of any kind? There are a lot of ghost towns in this part of the world, and what I mean by a ghost town is a developer comes in and they buy, a mile of beach, let's say, and they chop that mile of beach up into a bunch of home sites. They put a road from one end to the other, to stick some telephone poles, run some electric down to the other end. And a typical way to develop is to develop 100 feet wide on the beach by 200 feet deep. And that gives you about a half an acre lot with 100 feet of ocean front. And typically, people sell those for anywhere between, say, $100,000, $150,000 to maybe $400,000 or $500,000 in Costa Rica. And so you've got these half-acre ocean lots strung out for a mile, 5,000 feet in a mile, 50 lots in a mile. So you have 50 lots running down the beach, you have 50 lots behind them, you have a road down the middle. And what we find all over Central America is that there's no homes. You might have an entire strip of lots that are all sold, and there's not a house in sight. And I always like to ask at conferences, I always ask people, I say, all right, who out there on this big long stretch of beach wants to be the first house out there all by themselves? And maybe one hand goes up, but usually not. And if a hand goes up, I tease them, and if your hand went up, maybe you're a Robinson Crusoe. But you know what? Most people aren't. Most people want neighbors, friends, activities, things to do. And these mile-long stretches of beach that just simply have no homes are going to be ghost towns for many, many years, probably decades, because it takes a long time for the first people to come and decide they want to build a home out there all by themselves. Community is different. Community is very, very different. Another question that you have to really think about is, what kind of design standards are in place? What's the zoning, in other words? What's the developer going to do with this property? What's the developer going to allow you to do with your property? And I think we see it most where somebody will come along and build a beautiful home on one of their lots, in the oceanfront lot. They build a beautiful $500,000 house. It's gorgeous, it's spectacular, Mediterranean style or Spanish colonial style or whatever it might be. And somebody comes along and builds the Hobbit house right next door. And you'd say, whoa, you can't do that. Well, why not? There are no architectural covenants and restrictions in many cases. There's no zoning. A municipal zoning, somebody could actually open up a pig farm on their half acre next door, and there'd be nothing you could do about it because there's no zoning at the municipal level or the county level, or they don't call it county, but at that level. And so zoning is developer dependent. The developer has to lay out what's going to be allowed and then enforce it. And so you need to, and this goes to the third set of questions, which is know the developer. But here we're going to talk about those covenants and restrictions for owned community, because when you get the zoning that requires construction to a certain standard, to a certain design standard as well as engineering standard, you get to the point where you can actually have people, have homes, have community. It's not a big long stretch of lots on the beach like we talked about. There's a build requirement, and the build requirement has a certain standards associated with it. This is what it takes to build community, and that's so important. If you're looking for community, you need to make sure that community will happen and can happen. And the developer is the person who designs it and enforces it. So make sure you ask that question. We're still talking about owned community today, and in the owned community section of the 15 questions that we should ask when we're buying property overseas, the real issue is, again, kind of buy what you see but own community. And these two tie together in many, many ways. But under the own community section, I always like to ask, is there something there? Are there pools? Are there tennis courts or golf courses or clubhouses or restaurants or bars? Places for people to get together. What amenities exist? Buy what you see, right? But if the amenities exist, what we end up with is a place for people to get together. And that's what creates community. When people can come together, bump into one another, sit at a table next to one another, hear the over a table talking about their sister in Atlanta, and the next thing you know, well, I have a sister in Atlanta, where are they? Oh, my sister lives in Ellijay or wherever it is, and that's not Atlanta. But anyway, you get the point. The idea is that when we have places for people to get together and enjoy the company of one another, then community can happen. And community is truly the hallmark of a wonderful quality of life experience, whether it's for vacation or for retirement. Another thing that we care about, again, this goes to infrastructure, something not very sexy, the buy what you see. And specifically, it's telecommunications infrastructure. Because today, community, which is the theme of these 5 questions that we're talking about right now, community is worldwide. And so we depend upon, in fact, we take for granted the idea of instant communications, high-speed bandwidth, being able to go online and make a Skype call or a voice-over IP call, or if you're hanging out in Belize or Nicaragua or Costa Rica or Panama and your kids are sled riding up in Minnesota and your grandkids are sled riding and your kids send you the video, you want to be able to watch her. You want to be able to get on a Skype call with the grandkids, watch them drinking hot chocolate while you're sitting under a palm tree with your laptop open. High-speed bandwidth. It's something we take for granted. Make sure it's there, because it is part of the larger community that allows us to be somewhere but still stay tied into friends and family back home. One question I get a lot, and our salespeople get a lot, is how much is the homeowner's fee or the condo owner fee? And this is a really serious subject, and I know it's probably not one that you're going to want to really like the answer I'm about to give. But the answer is this. You need to ask yourself, is this fee high enough? High enough, right? We always want a low condo fee or a low property owner fee. It's a carrying cost, it's an obligation, it's an ongoing obligation. But in this part of the world, there really are no audits that allow a buyer to come along and say, well, let me see that track record, let me see that budget. You should ask those questions, by the way. Is there a budget for the Homeowners Association? Are those funds kept separate? Are they pooled for the use of the maintenance of the building, the hiring of security, the running of the electricity? But the question you must ask is, are these fees high enough? Because it's so easy for a salesperson or a developer to say, oh yeah, the fees are $50 a month. And then in 3 years, when there's not enough money to redo the roof or repaint the pool or whatever it is you're doing, you'll get a special assessment. And special assessments are no fun. So when somebody says, they tell you how much the condo fee is, or you ask the question, hey, I'd like to see the condo fee, I'd like to see the budget, right? You need to kind of noodle out, take a pencil out, kind of think about it and say, all right, I'm going to noodle on this, and come up with what I think it would really cost to maintain this property, these common areas, these amenities. And if that number doesn't seem right, just understand that even though it's a really low condo fee or property owner fee, it's probably not enough. In which case, you need to at least mentally say, well, I still love this place, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Or maybe these guys are pulling my leg a little bit and they're just saying what they need to say to make the sale happen. Gosh, folks, so important. Is the condo fee high enough? So do your math on that. Make sure it makes sense logically and intuitively to you, and you'll be safe from big special assessments that kind of whack you upside the head when you least expect it. Another question I get is, where's the future of the development? What's happening? Is this whole thing going to get turned into a big parking lot? Are we going to asphalt over everything? Are we going to put up tall buildings everywhere? And so one of the things that's really important is understanding the future development phases, looking at a site plan, understanding what's coming down line, because if you care about the park spaces and the green spaces that exist today, you want to make sure that those are deeded. You want to make sure that the actual site plan that's been registered with the lands department includes those green areas and preserves those park spaces or green areas or whatever, beach access, those types of things, because in the end, if they're not set up in the site plans, developers really can do just about anything they want to do. And so you want to make sure, A, that they're on the site plan, and B, that they're somehow recorded so that you are protected with your investment to end up with what you think you're buying at the front end. One question we get a lot, especially at our Grand Pacifica project where we're building homes for people, is how can I oversee construction of a home from 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 miles away? And that's a really, really good question. One of the things that we have to look at when we're buying property overseas is the notion that we're probably not going to be there when it's being built. And so what are the protections in place to verify that the plans that I've agreed to, the designs that I've agreed to, are being met and kept in accordance with my wishes? Well, that most development companies will have somebody or some process in place. Ask about it. Who's going to do it? How are they going to do it? Are they going to take pictures and email them to me? How often are they going to take those pictures and email them to me? And then you, the buyer, should plan to come down at least 3 or 4 times during this building process to come visually inspect it yourself. I'll tell a funny story about me. Again, a lot of these 15 questions, the lessons I've learned, have been lessons that I've paid the price to learn. So I built a house in Managua where my family has lived for the last 12 years. And so we built a beautiful home, and the house is getting done, the kitchen cabinets are in, the bathrooms are in, and we're walking through, kind of like a pre-walk through, and we walk into the master bedroom, and there's a hole in the floor. And we're like, when's our tub coming, Dora? Like we had this like a jacuzzi tub in our master bathroom. I'm like, so when's the tub coming, Dora? She goes, you didn't order it. I'm like, what do you mean we didn't order it? She says, you didn't order it. You didn't buy it yet. I'm like, what do you mean? She says, well, you need to order it. You need to buy it. It's not included. I said, what do you mean it's not included? It's on the plans. Look, right here is a picture of this tub. And she says, yeah, but it's not included. There's a picture of a pickup truck in your driveway, too, in the architectural plans, and it's not included. Okay, guys, I'm just telling you. We don't know what we don't know. Coming all the way back to the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. The tub wasn't included. I didn't know the right question to ask. Hot tip, you know what else isn't included in a house in most of Latin America? The internet cable, if you don't go Wi-Fi, the actual cable or TV cable running through the walls to your outlets. That's not included either. No big deal, it doesn't cost very much if you buy it while they're building the house. If you wait till the house is done, then you gotta have people climbing around up in the ceiling or punching holes through concrete walls, running conduit where there isn't any conduit. That's expensive. The other thing that happens is things like the fans. The fans may not be included because even though they're on the plans, you may still have to go out and buy the fans, the lights, the different fixtures. Well, certainly fixtures you would have to buy, although I think in North America there's probably a package that comes standard. So if you're buying a house in Latin America, or you're building a house, not buying a house, but you're actually going to build a house from the ground up, you need to know these things. Now, some companies like ours, we put these packages in. We consider all of those things standard. But when you're shopping for price, a lot of times people say, oh yeah, we can buy a house in Nicaragua for $50 a square foot. Well, that's true. It doesn't include, most of the things that we would say finish a house. So again, apples to apples comparison. If you want soup to nuts, make sure the developer or the contractor is going to give you soup to nuts and actually put the things in the house that we as North Americans expect to be there when we walk in and have our furniture moved in to come enjoy the home that we've just purchased. When we buy property overseas, hopefully the developer will be around for many, many years. And like we talked about in the other question, it is like getting married to the developer when you buy a piece of property. So we do hope they're around. And one of the things that lets somebody be around over the long haul is financial viability. And so that's something that we need to look at when we're buying a piece of property overseas. How strong financially is the developer? Do they have a track record? My goodness, experience in the business is so important. And one of the things we see in this part of the world are what I call hobbyist developers. They come down because they love to dive here in Belize, or like to surf in Nicaragua or Costa Rica, or they just want to move to Panama to enjoy a nice retirement. But they're probably not the kind of people that could kick up and put their feet up and lay in a hammock all day. So they buy a piece of property and they start developing. That's fine. Understand what it is. Experience. How long have they been around? Have they done this before? So important. You don't want to be the experiment that they try everything out on. Or maybe you do want to be the experiment. I don't know. That's up to you. Just know what it is going in up front. But the financial viability of a company is so important. And this is hard for us as North Americans to really ask. But for example, if you go and a developer's telling you about the golf course they're gonna build, we're gonna build a golf course, or we're gonna build something, you have the right to say, hey, Mr. Developer, print out last month's bank statement, and let's say it's a golf course, and a golf course costs, $4 or $5 million to build 18 holes, at the low end, right? So you say, just show me December's bank statement. And if you see $4 or $5 million on the bank statement, great, he's got the money to build a golf course. If he's got a few $100,000, you have the right to ask the developer, well, how are you gonna build a golf course with $200,000? See, gonna is the easiest word in the developer or salesperson's lexicon, okay? It's thrown around a lot in this part of the world because, again, there are no bonding agencies to enforce what's being advertised, no truth in advertising laws. And so you, the consumer, have to ask the tough question, which I like is the old Tom Cruise thing, show me the money. Show me the money. Hey, bank account last month, is it there, is it not there? One way that a lot of developers do business in this part of the world is they use pre-sales to finance the construction of infrastructure or amenities. And that's really dangerous. In a good market, when things are cycling up, they sell a few lots, they build some streets, now the excitement of having the streets in, they sell a few more lots, and now they can put in the electric and a few more lots, and they can do this, and it's crescendoing up, and it's really great. But when the market starts to spiral the other way, then all of a sudden you've sold some lots as a developer, and all of a sudden the sales stop. You have no money to do the next thing you said you were going to do. So pre-sales funding is a popular way of funding development in this part of the world. I'm not sure it's the best way. Either the developer has their own money, they've got wealth of some kind to bring to the table to do this infrastructure outlay, to build the clubhouse, build the pools, whatever it is, or the developer has the ability to raise money in an equity capital fashion. That's what our company's chosen to do. We've set up our company to be much like a North American company. We have shareholders, we raise equity, we take that equity and we actually do what we say we're going to do with it. And we have done what we said we were going to do for the last 16 years. And that's really the second part of the question, going to track record. How long's the company been around? Have they done what they said they were going to do? Can you go back and look at the documentation from 15 or 16 years ago? Look at the very first flyers that they published. Or maybe it's 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Hey, let me see that very first flyer you put out. What'd you say you were going to do? Here you are 5 years later. How much of these things can you say, yep, yep, yep? So important. Track record. Have they done what they said they were going to do? Do they have the ability to do what they say they're going to do? And that usually involves money. Ask the question. Be like Tom Cruise. Show me the money. Show me the money. Something else that's important for many, many folks coming south of the border is some type of financing, and it's generally not available in this part of the world. The banks in Latin America don't like to lend to North Americans, and certainly banks in the U.S. don't like to lend on collateral in Belize or Costa Rica or Panama. And so there's a hole in the market. And so what tends to happen is buyers have to come and be able to write the check, so to speak, or wire the funds for 100% of the purchase price. The real issue is if you don't have that, then you have to go to the developer and try to negotiate some kind of, well, what if I put 50% down or those kinds of things, and that's fine when you can do it. Financing is so important. We work with KeyBank in Belize, and KeyBank has agreed to finance our customers up to 50%. And we then have the choice to work with a client like yourselves and hold a second position of 20 or 30%. So we can actually go to the marketplace, help you, and say, hey, look, if you're coming down and you've got 20 or 30% down, say on a $200,000 condo, the bank and our company, because we are financially strong, can carry the rest of that balance over a term of 10, 15, even 20 years. So financing is important. So ask about it, and if it's available, fantastic. If it's not, remember KeyBank and an ECI, because we certainly can make that available for you. Here's a strange question for Know the Developer, but I think this is symptomatic of how a developer thinks and feels about the clients, and that is there a central sewer system? So important in this part of the world, because if there's no central sewer system, what the developer is doing is pushing the cost of managing waste to you, the consumer. And depending on where you are. I mean, here we are in Belize. You can see the sand behind me. The soils here on the island are very sandy. The soils in much of Belize are sandy as well, alluvial. But on the Pacific side of Central America, whether it's Nicaragua, Costa Rica, or Panama, it's a totally different soil type. It's a heavy, thick, expansive clay. And that clay in the dry season will take a lot of water. But in the rainy season, when it's saturated, will take no more water. And so putting in a sewer system that's environmentally safe and sound costs a lot of money, or a septic system, in your property, because you've got to actually dig out a bunch of the clay, put in a bunch of the sand, and it costs a lot of money. So what's happening is you might get a great deal on your lot, but how much is the septic system going to cost? And remember, and this is like a yucky topic, so I hate to even talk about it, but we're going to talk about it because this is all about due diligence and making sure you know the right questions to ask. A really conscientious developer will enforce an environmentally safe septic system implementation on the part of the homeowners. But, a lot of stuff's a little loosey-goosey out there, and so, or even the developer's not around. I mean, the developer sold off 100 lots on the side of a hill, beautiful oceanfront lots at the bottom, beautiful view lots on the top, and kind of everything in between. But the developer's gone, and now you've got 100 owners who all own properties, and it's up to you to put in the right sewer system, septic system. So your developer comes along and says, yeah, we put a tank over here, we run a couple lines, pop, 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 pop. That's great if you're at the top of the hill. But what if you're 3/4 of the way down the hill and the people behind you put in a septic system that's not quite functional? Dry season? No problem. Rainy season, when the soil's saturated, everything comes up to the top and runs downhill. Again, if you're at the top of the hill, who cares? But if you're anywhere else on that property, it really might be a yucky situation. And so understanding how the sewage is being handled is so important for your quality of life. And it's also important to know the developer, because in the end, it's the developer making the decision to spend the money up front and put that cost into the lot, or push it off on you, the consumer, and let you deal with whatever happens coming later. Ask the question. That's an important but very yucky question. A question that I get now a lot is, what about safety and security? And in this part of the world, we get a bad rap. We get a rap that, it's Central America, it must be dangerous. People have these stories that they've heard fifth hand, sixth hand, seventh hand, but most of them aren't true. Crime is local, and that's what we know. I mean, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I moved to Washington, D.C., or the D.C. area. People say, you're moving to Washington. That's a dangerous city. Well, yeah, some parts of Washington are dangerous, but most of Washington is not. And so the same thing holds true in Central and South America. I mean, Belize, yeah, there's dangerous parts of Belize. There are not dangerous parts of Belize. Folks, where I am today, this is not dangerous. Very little crime on the island of Ambergris Caye. but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have security in our communities, because security is sort of the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so understanding what the security is like, how it's implemented, how it's operated is absolutely crucial, because again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So ask about security. Is it a gated community? Is the area fairly safe? Talk to people on the street. That's one way to really find out. Talk to the different people. Talk to the restaurant owners. Talk to people sitting at a bar. Talk to people who live in the community. How safe is it? Have there been any problems? And if the answer is generally, nah, it's nice, I think you can trust that, because they have a horse in the race. They live here. They work here. And again, it's just that simple little bit of due diligence. Asking that question will make sure that you end up in an area that you feel safe and comfortable, because ultimately, if you feel safe, you can relax and enjoy your home or condo in one of these wonderful countries south of the border. I think the last question is really a simple question that I see a lot of people make mistakes in, and that is there title? Is there title to the property? Is there title insurance? That's even better. Is there title is the first question. Is there title insurance? That's the second question. And really, when we're buying property overseas, I see a black and white divide. There is title, and it's good title, and you can have lawyers check that out. Or there isn't title. It's right of possession property, or it's some other kind of title problem property, and then they're gonna work it out. I mean, you hear that all the time. Oh yeah, we're gonna get this worked out, and right, great. You get it worked out, and when you've got a clear title that you can transfer to me, you call me, right? There's always a story, and there's great title. That's the other thing we hear about this part of the world. Oh, you can't get title to the property. Like in Mexico along the coast, they have what's called fideicomiso. It's a banker's trust, because in Mexico you're not allowed to, you haven't been allowed to. I think that policy is changing now. But in the past, in Mexico, you couldn't own the land. You had to do it inside this banker's trust fideicomiso thing that they set up. And a lot of people have, and it's probably okay in Mexico. But Honduras has a constitutional law. It's in their constitution that says foreigners may not own property within, I think it's 1 kilometer of the coast, or maybe it's 2 kilometers, doesn't matter. Anyway, close to the coastline. Now, there's an exemption for property half a hectare or less, about 1.25 acres. But let's say you bought a little 5-acre farmette on the side of a hill near the ocean, beautiful views, you build your nice house. Constitutionally, you are not allowed to own that. And so people put it inside a Honduran corporation. They put a couple Honduran directors on the board, and generally that's okay. But what if you get sideways with the Honduran directors on your board? Like, constitutionally, you can't own it. And so for me, it's really important to just say, hey, if I can get title legally in the country, number one, great. If there's title insurance, ooh, even better, because title insurance means there's a title company that's going to back you up and guarantee the title to that property. So is there title? Yes. Move on. If there's no title, right of possession, constitutionally prohibited, whatever that might be, or some story about how the title's getting worked out, leave it alone. Let it rest. Stay with stuff that's titled. Even better, stay with stuff that has title insurance on it, and you'll always know and be able to sleep at night with the great peace of mind that you have a piece of property that's really yours.